So George Michael has died. George Michael was a big singer back in the 1980s. He was one of the big artists from the 1980s. He was someone like he was one of the big artists along with people like Madonna, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Cyndi Lauper, Boy George, Katie Lang, the group that Bobby Brown was in, New Edition, Lionel Richie, El DeBarge, Prince, Corey Hart, etc., etc. He was one of those people who was big in the 1980s, and he had his songs. He was in a group called Wham, and he had some of his songs included "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go," "Faith," "Father Figure," "I Want Your Sex," and those were mostly in the 80s. It was mostly in the 80s when he had his biggest hits. Then in the 90s, I think he had some songs as well, but they were maybe not as big. And then in the 2000s, I don't think he had any really big hits that I can think of. But so anyway, so he died on December 25th, Christmas Day, 2016, and he was born on June 25th, 1963. His real name was Georgios Kyriakos Panayiotou, which is a Greek name. His father was a Greek Cypriot, a Greek person from Cyprus, from the island of Cyprus, who immigrated to England. I think his mother was an English person, like a multi-generational English woman. And so I guess he took the name George Michael. That's the name that he used as a performer. Now his band, he joined a band, actually his group, it was a duo. It was two of them, George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley, and they started the group in 1981. They had their first album in 1983. It went to number 1 in the UK charts. He actually sang on that the song, the Band-Aid, "Do They Know It's Christmas," which was one of those aid. I think it was one of those songs that they made for charity for people in Africa, I think. So anyway, so he had a bunch of hits through the 1980s. I think he went solo at some point, maybe in the late 80s. He went solo. So it looks like the group broke up in 1986. Then George Michael went solo. He had a bunch of hits again in the late 1980s. And so anyway, so now he wasn't that old. He was only 53 years old when he died. So the question is, it's unusual for someone to die at that relatively young age. So the question is, why did he die? And now the thing about George Michael is George Michael was a homosexual. Or bi, I don't know, whatever. He had sex with men. So now let's see. He got arrested in 1998. He got arrested for engaging in a lewd act in a public restroom in Beverly Hills, California. So I think he got caught by a undercover police officer in a sting operation, because from what I understand, what happens with these I've heard about these sting operations. There was another singer, Tevin Campbell, from the, I think, 90s or something. He was an R&B singer. He got caught in one of those undercover stings by an undercover officer or something in a public park, trying to solicit sex from another man in a public park. And it was an undercover officer. There was some congressman and a senator in the United States, a Republican guy. He got caught in a public washroom in the airport trying to solicit sex from an undercover officer. So what I think happens is these situations is there's these some men who have sex with men, MSM, they tend to go to these public areas and try to pick up strangers, have anonymous sex with men that they don't know. So so they may be going to public washrooms or parks or wherever, and what happens is maybe some guy gets solicited, some men get solicited, or they get kind of like sexually harassed by these gay guys, right? Or these MSM guys who are trying to pick them up. Then they get angry, or they start complaining. They call the police, like, oh, these gay guys are having sex in the washroom, or this gay guy tried to sexually approach me or whatever in a public washroom or in a park or whatever. And people, they start complaining. So then the police send the undercover officers to these places to to start arresting these guys. And this is where you see some of these celebrities, guys like George Michael, getting arrested in these situations, like George Michael and Tevin Campbell and that Republican guy. I can't remember what his name was, but so anyway, so George Michael got caught in this thing. Now, so what that means is the fact that he was caught in a public washroom, that says that, see, if somebody gets caught doing something one time, the chances are that they've been doing this for a while, right? So it's like people don't usually get caught the first time they do something. So this was probably something that George Michael was into doing. He was probably into having anonymous sex with other men in public places, washrooms or wherever. He was probably into that lifestyle or that behavior. So anyway, and then you have he had a relationship with another man named Anselmo Felipa. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he was a Brazilian fashion designer type of guy. And so anyway, so Felipa turned out to be HIV positive, and he died. Felipa died in 1993 from an AIDS-related brain hemorrhage. Okay, so you have George Michael. He had a boyfriend who died from AIDS. Then he's going out and having anonymous sex with other men in all the public places. So I think that then more recently, in recent years, like the last, let's say 5 years or whatever, 5, 6, 7 years, he's been having health problems. He's been I think something happened to him. He got sick, and at one point in time he was having a concert, and he had to cancel a concert or something, and there are rumors that he had AIDS. So now it's definitely possible, because like I said, he had that boyfriend die from AIDS before. Then he's having all this anonymous sex with these most likely having anonymous sex with men. Anyway, so if George Michael was engaging in all these kinds of behaviors, it's definitely possible that he may have contracted HIV. And that's not, basically gay men are at a higher risk of HIV. That's pretty well-known fact. If you look at statistics in the United States, or basically in most industrialized countries, even in some of these developing countries as well, like, it's usually gay men who have sex with men have a higher chance of contracting HIV. Like, I think it's 70% in the United States. 70% of new HIV infections are men who have sex with men. So, and then George Michael, It's definitely possible that he could have had HIV. He could have had AIDS as well. Now, see, most of the time people can treat HIV, can be treated, and it won't progress to AIDS if people are taking medication. But there's a couple of possibilities. First of all, it's possible that sometimes they have strains of HIV that can't be treated by the medication, or that don't respond to the medication. So it's possible that George Michael had something like that. It's possible that he just didn't take his medication. Some people don't take their medication, then they, then they start getting, then it progresses to AIDS. It's possible that it could be drug related. His death could have been drug related. Like he could have been using certain, I don't know what kinds of drugs he could be using, but he could have been using drugs. It could also be a suicide as well. That's another possibility. He could have committed suicide. So it's hard to tell now because they haven't released a cause of death. So we can only speculate at this point in time. So it's hard to tell. The other thing is people tend to, it seems to me, again, I don't have hard data on this, but it seems to me like a lot of people die around the holiday season. This seems to be a time when a lot of people die. For one thing, I think it's flu season, at least in the northern hemisphere. It tends to be flu season. People get a lot of colds and stuff are going around at this point in time. So you have, for example, Queen Elizabeth II. This Christmas was too sick to give her usual church address. So a lot of people get sick, and for example, I've gotten sick around Christmas time, around the holiday time, late December, early January. This is a time when people, you get the flus going around and stuff like that. And if somebody is not in good health already, if they already have health problems, and George Michael was already having health problems, if he, for example, even if he had AIDS or something like that, or some other issues, some other health issues, then if there was a flu, he caught some other flu or whatever, some other infection, then that could have killed him. So who knows? Could have been AIDS, could have been suicide, could have been drugs. It's hard to tell. Could have been some other disease as well. So I'm not saying that heterosexuals can't catch HIV. I'm just saying that that it tends to be more common among men who have sex with men. So just more prevalent. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying, I know heterosexuals can also contract it, men and women, male and female heterosexuals can also catch it. So